And time to take a look at what's been making headlines around the world, both in the press and online. And for that duty today, it falls on the shoulders of the lovely Solange Moujan. Hello, Solange.
Hi, Annette.
OK, we're going to start with Hong Kong, obviously. And the leader of the city-state of Hong Kong has spoken out a day after hundreds of thousands of protesters took to the streets against a very controversial bit of legislation which would effectively change the territory's extradition laws.
Yeah, Carrie Lam, the leader of Hong Kong, said the bill will go ahead as planned. This, regardless of the protesting hundreds of thousands of people that came out into the streets on Sunday. According to the Hong Kong-based paper South China Morning Post, Lam said that changing the law was important in order to uphold justice. Now, this is very much in the same line that's being flushed out by Beijing. In the China Daily, the English-language newspaper run by the Chinese Communist Party, they said that the extradition amendment strengthens the rule of law in Hong Kong. They are a mouthpiece for Beijing, and they say that people who have committed a crime don't face justice because they can't be extradited from Hong Kong. And for the China Daily, the mass protest yesterday was, quote, a sign that residents are being hoodwinked by the opposition camp and their foreign allies, end quote. The editorial blames foreign powers for trying to, quote, create havoc and hurt China, end quote.
But Solange, for the hundreds of thousands of people who took to the streets in Hong Kong, many are saying that they're there for a very different reason.
Yeah, many of the protesters told the paper that they knew the rally would not change much, but that the need to demonstrate or exercise their freedom of protest was an essential message to send to Beijing. That doing so is part of their DNA, as they increasingly fear that Beijing is reneging on the 1997 power transition from British rule, one where there was an agreement for one country, two systems, sort of set up for the semi-autonomous region. Nevertheless, the Post says that the massive numbers of marchers has reinvigorated the pro-democracy camp in Hong Kong, even if the bill, which is slated to be voted on later this week, is likely to pass, potentially making Hong Kong residents vulnerable to unfair trials and gag extraditions.
Now, fear of human rights abuses in Hong Kong is one reason those street protests obviously occur, but such fears are also being felt in Saudi Arabia, where the case of a teenage boy is making headlines.
Yeah, the New York Times tells us the story of a Saudi boy. He was arrested when he was 13 years old for the alleged crimes of participating in anti-government protests 3 years earlier when he was 10. And he has been in jail ever since. Mortaja Queriris, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, just turned 18, and now rights groups say that he could be facing the death penalty. Now, his story, the Times tells us, isn't an isolated one. Amnesty International says that at least 110 people have been executed in Saudi Arabia so far this year. So that's from January to May.
OK, now shifting gears entirely and heading towards Barcelona, and there's some architectural news that construction on the Sagrada Familia has finally gotten the seal of approval in the city. Tell us more.
It has. As Le Point tells us, Gaudi's Sagrada Familia, which 4.5 million people visit every year, and which has been under construction off and on since the first stone was laid in 1882, has finally a legal building permit. Now, El País says the document was accorded in exchange for 4.6 million euros, and the deputy mayor hailed it as putting an end to a historical anomaly. Meanwhile, developers are thought to be quite happy to pay up now because the final bill, when the Sagrada Familia is finally finished, which isn't expected before 2026, would likely have been much more money. So 137 years of technically being an illegal construction site, the church has finally the city's seal.
That is an amazing story, truly is. Now, in science news, researchers have discovered that elephants have the amazing ability of being able to count with their trunks.
Yep.
Seriously?
Yes, seriously. Scientists have found that the mammal's sense of smell is so good that they can actually tell if there's a lot more food in one bucket than in another bucket. Researchers did this by using buckets where the smell of the food could escape, but nothing visual. And elephants consistently chose the fuller bucket if the difference of quantities wasn't minimal. And we're not talking about a peanut or a seed or two difference here. Anyway, science say they don't know what it is about the elephant's smell that creates creates this counting ability. But the discovery could help ensure that endangered mammals don't leave protected areas, because it could help people ensure that the odors of human foods don't go into these natural reserves.
Okay, we're going to turn now to sports news, and it does appear that France is a bit of a sports place to be at the moment. We've got the Women's World Cup, and of course we had the Roland-Garros, the French Open final yesterday, with Rafael Nadal winning for the 12th time.
Yes, 12 out of 12. That is the headline today of El País, an elogious tribute to the Spanish tennis player's 12th win at Roland-Garros. And known for his prowess on clay, the Spanish paper Marca says that there will never be another great like Rafa, while the French sports daily L'Equipe says that the 33-year-old's win yesterday against Austrian Dominic Thiem was a herculean feat. And now, with 18 Grand Slam wins to his name, he said he's going to try and beat Roger Federer's 20 Grand Slam singles record.
Truly impressive.
Yes.
Okay, now finally, Solange, you have a story about a modern-day shipwreck.
Yeah, Der Spiegel tells us that this past weekend, a newly restored sailing ship crashed into the Elbe River after colliding with a container ship. Now, this was bad news for the ship, which was built in 1883, and it's actually Hamburg's last remaining ship from the wood-building era, and it had actually just undergone a 1.5 million euro restoration. So that's the bad news. But the good news is that the rescue boats just happened to be nearby for another reason, and so they managed within minutes to get the 43 passengers on board to safety. And finally, as for the boat itself, it will be able, most likely, to be dredged up and craned out and restored again.
Okay, well, thanks for that. That's Solange Moujam with the day's press review, or as I like to call it, the online review as well. And if you want to take a look at some of the stories we've just been chatting about, you can, of course, head to our website, that being France24.com.